Put your hands together because God is the greatest power.
That's another interesting dive into um, what God is telling us as far as what we see and what we get, and understanding our vision and our eyes being important. We can see why God's people could end up building an Egyptian god, and understanding that text, and understanding that what we see with our eyes and how we look into our situations, whether or not we look with the power and the strength of God versus the power and the strength of ourselves, will depict a very different situation. And as we look through tonight's text, we'll see what it means, as far as what you see is what you get, and even understanding how to reuse this passage, and the meaning of it, literally being that there's nothing hidden, and what you are looking at is the real thing. Or I see another one says that in computing, the way something displays on the screen is the way that it would display in print. And so understanding that the way that God lays out the word and the way that God gives us the promises and the things that we have to do to go after them, they're laid out in front of us, and we can understand that there is nothing that's hidden from us, from God, once we get into God's word. And that the same way that is computed, as it says here, it's the same way that it displays it on the screen is the way that it will print out. And we understand that the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. We understand that the way that displays on the screen is the same way that it would print out. And so understanding that our steps, as long as they're lined up and they're lined up the right way and the way of righteousness, then that will print out, and that will be the results of the work that we put in, understanding our fruit. But even understanding how Jesus, when he spoke and when he came, only what they could see is what they got, and some people weren't able to believe because of their eyes and because of their vision. But tonight's text, like I said, it'll bring out more as far as what you see is what you get, and understanding a little bit more about the text, to where Moses had gotten the word to send out some spies and to spy out the land, and this land that would be given to the children of God. And God was sending them to see this land and to look at it, and to spy it out and to check it out to see what it was. But understanding how some of them were caught up in the giants of the land, and they didn't grasp hold of the fruit and the power of God, and they went in aspects of themselves. And we see it talked about them seeing themselves as grasshoppers, as the giants saw them, and understanding that sometimes we may look small, and understanding sometimes the giants may look big, but we understand that God has some fruit for us. And as long as we look at these things with the power of God, it'll be some differences in our outcomes. But as we move through this, what we see is what we get, and we have to understand that we have to look at things and start to look at things with the power and the strength of God, and not the power and the strength of ourselves. And tonight's scripture, right at Numbers 13, chapter 13, verses 27, we will start. It says, and they told him and said, we came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. And said, nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. And so it says, and Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and possess it, for we are well able to overcome it. And so understanding in the mix of this, and when Caleb stopped him and Caleb told them to wait, and I can imagine him telling them to hold up and to wait before you keep going. Let me stop you, and let me part in here to make my point to stand with the strength of God to say that I understand that there's some giants there, and I understand that all of these different groups are there, and they saw all of these different children of Anak there, and they were puzzled by seeing these giants, and even understanding how David had defeated these giants coming. We see that they were afraid of some things that they could defeat, and not believing in the power of God and in the strength of God. They have started to cause themselves to start to deter and start to become in a way to where they didn't believe in the fruit of this land, because they were believing in themselves, and they were going to this land with the power of themselves, and they saw these giants, and in seeing these giants, they come back and they said that surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. And so understanding that they saw the fruit and they saw this fruit, but by the time they had gotten back, that these giants and these things had overcome them. And so it's teaching us that there's some fruit in our land, but there are some giants as well, that we have to overcome, and that we have to go forth understanding who God is, and understanding the position that God has put us in to go forth and to show his power to where we can become victorious, and he will get the glory. But they had come back with this negative report, and this negative report started to spill out into the people, and understanding how the people thought it was better that they would have been in Egypt, and better that they would return to Egypt, and they had even thought to pick a captain and return to Egypt, because they had gotten this report, and they had gotten some negative things about these giants that were there. And this congregation cried out in 14, as we'll look at some verses, and they cried out after getting this report, because they were so terrified because of the distress of some of those that have the spies that have went forth in order to spy out the promised land, the land that will be given to the children of God later on, and the land that will become theirs. God has sent them to look at it, and because of a negative, and because of them not trusting in the power of God, they had lost their faith, and understanding that they were not they didn't want to go into Canaan because of the way that they looked at this, and they were murmuring against Moses. And so tonight's message, as we look through this chapter in Numbers 13, and look at how what we see is what we get, and how God sets us up in order for some things to happen, and how we have to put our faith in position with our works, and understanding these go together. And without our faith, it's impossible to please God, because as we see, they were in a land, and they went to spy this land out. And we see that in the beginning of chapter 13, right at the beginning, and the Lord spake unto Moses, and he told them that he said, send these men to search out Canaan. And so we understand that God was sending some spies out, so that they could go and look into the land that would soon be theirs. And so Moses was given the word to send out some spies, and we understand it was a spy that was sent from each tribe. And so I think about how we're going out for our families, and how we're sent out from our families to get some of this fruit, and to get some of these things that God has already done and already proven to us. And when we return back, we will have a word, and we'll have some fruit from what God has already done and showed us, and it'll help us to prepare for this promised land. But we see that these men and these spies were ordered to go and to search the promised land, and it was a man from each tribe, and a man from each tribe there of Israel. And it said that they were ordered to spy out the land. And I want to move through the chapter a little bit, and in 13 and 18 I want to look at how they were ordered to spy out this land, and how they were ordered to look and to see this land. And it wasn't just going to look at it. It was going to see what it was. And so he gave an order saying, I need you to go and look at this land and see what it is. And as he said that, see what it is, and the people that dwelleth therein, whether they be strong or weak, few or many. It says, and what the land is, that they dwell in, whether it be good or bad, and what cities they be that they dwell in, whether in tents or in strongholds. And so as I read through this and I thought about it, how it started to get deeper, because we understand that the tent, it represents how we're to move and how we're to be able to move with God, and understanding our transitions, and then understanding how it's in are there in tents or strongholds. And I started to think about that in the people of God, the difference between us being in our tent and being able to move with God versus being in a stronghold and something holding us back. And so as he's asking them about these things, he wants them to go and to look at this land and to spy the land out, to see whether the land is good or not. And he says, and whether the land is, whether it be fat or lean, whether there be wood therein or not. It says, and be of good courage, and bring of the fruit of the land. And now was the time of the first grapes. And so even understanding how God was strategic enough to send them in the time of the first grapes, in the time of it being a harvest season, that when they got there, they would have some things to take back. They got there and they would have some fruit in order to return back and to show the people and understand that they were sent up to look at this land. And even moving down through 23 to where they had to carry this fruit back on a staff, and understanding that it was two of them that bore this and that carried this thing back. And so in 23 it says, and they came unto the brook of Eshcol, and cut down from thence a branch, one cluster of grapes, and they bear it between two upon a staff. And so if we think about the brook of Eshcol and how it reflects the productivity of the vineyards in the valley, and understanding how it talked about being in a valley, is how there's still some productivity in our valley. There's still some fruitfulness even in a valley place. And thinking about walking in the shadow of the valley, in the valley of death, and we think about these things and understanding how God's word will give us some strength even in our valley, and seeing that they were sent to look at some things, and this fruit that they had to carry back by two, it's showing us the fruit of this land. And so how when God sends us to our promised land, he's sending them to scope out their promised land. The fruit of this land was so big, and it was so large to get us to understand that the fruit of that land will be so large, and it will be so much that we're showing us that it wasn't just one that could carry this. So we can't carry it by ourselves. It'll be some people that'll have to help us carry this fruit, because it'll be so much. And we see how this place was talking about the fruitfulness even in the valley. And so understanding how where they brought this fruit from, and it said that they returned from the searching after the land, and they searched for 40 days. And so I'm understanding how they had went and searched this land, and they were sent out with a certain cue to search this land and to figure out what did this land have, how good was it, what was there. And as they went and searched, they was able to come across some fruit, and we see that this fruit was very large, and we see that the spies came back to report, and as they came back to report, it says, and they went and came to Moses and to Aaron and to all of the congregation, to the children of Israel, unto the wilderness of Paran, to Kadesh, and brought back word unto them and unto the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And so understanding how they had went, and they had been sent out to spy out this land, and they had been went to look at, to see what this land was. And we see how they had came forth, and that they had understood in 27 that there was some milk and some honey, and that we understand that milk and that honey, it teaches us the description of the abundance of the land, and the abundance of how things will flow, and how our promise will be fulfilled in the land there. But we see that they had also saw the children of Anak. And so understand that this problem came was that because the people focused on their own strength rather than the power of God. And so the point of the later victories over the Midianites and the Amorites and the Canaanites, it was a demonstration of God's strength, and understanding that the power of Israel was never in her armies, and the victory came at the hand of the Lords of hosts. And so understanding that their power in this situation and how they were moving, it played a big part, in how they were looking at things played a big part, because we see moving forward in the story, that what they saw is what they got. And so as we start to move forward and we start to see some things, that we see that what we see and how we start to come about life with our eyes, and how we start to move in our situations, they play a big part, because after this report had went forth, and after they said, nevertheless, that we understand that there is some milk and honey there, that they have saw these giants. And after they saw these giants, we see that they show us that there's some milk and some honey, and we see that they understand this, and they see this, and they see these things. But when they come back and they start to give the report, right in 31 and 33, and they bring this report back, even though they came back with the word and with the fruit, we understand they come back with this report. And so in 31 it says, but the men that went up with him said, we be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are. And so understanding that they started to speak out of their own strength, and that they forgot to remember that the strength of God was greater than any of those giants that they saw, any of our problems that we see in the land, that God is bigger than these problems. And as long as we're able to go in the strength of God, that we understand we can overcome, and we'll be able to go and take the fruit of the land, and be able to overtake these giants. But understanding that it says, but when they came back, the report that they brought after seeing the fruit and after seeing the giants, and sometimes when I think about the land that we're in, there's so many giants, but there's also some fruit, and our report is important, because it will play a major part in people's lives and how they move. But because God is wanting us to see that even though there are some giants, and even though there are some things that we have to overcome, that there's some fruit as well on the land, and that fruit is worth it. And once we start to overcome some things, that there'll be some fruit that'll be different. And so in 32 it says, and they brought up an evil report to the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And see how they're looking at themselves, and they're not looking at themselves through the power of God and through what God can do in them. They're looking at what they can do in themselves, and they're showing us how they're looking at themselves, and they're not looking at themselves saying that all things, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, as we saw in Philippians 4 and 13. But they're looking through what they do through their strength and themselves. And it says in there, we saw the giants, the son of Anak, which come of the giants, it says, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. And so it says, and so we were in their sight. And so we see that they tell us first that in their own sight that they're grasshoppers and that they're small. And so sometimes we see ourselves in the eyes of these giants and in the eyes of these things that's in front of us. We may see ourselves as grasshoppers, but what it's teaching us is that no matter how small we see ourselves, if we understand our power of God, and we understand who God is, and understanding that what we see is what we get, and if we speak into our situations and understand that our strength with God can turn some things around. We see that the people in the Bible that Jesus had touched, they knew that if I can just get to Jesus, and I can just figure out where he is, even the blind Bartimaeus, he just knew that Jesus was coming by. And so understanding that we have to know this, and we have to know that Jesus is the one that can do it, and that God has set this up for us to where our lives can be turned around and be strategically placed. But we have to know that what we see is what we get, and we have to understand our power of God, because if we start to tell ourselves that we can't do it, and it won't happen, that we understand that this is exactly what will happen, and we start to believe in those things. And as we start to believe in that, we see that they have forgotten about the fruit of God that God had promised them in this land, and they started to take on these issues and these problems instead of embracing the fruit, and they saw themselves as grasshoppers in the sight of these giants. And it said that after they saw themselves as grasshoppers, it said that, and then so are we in their sight. And so looking at how we see ourselves, and sometimes it's not how other people see us. We sometimes see ourselves like this, and we'll tell God that God, I look like a grasshopper in their sight. But God is telling you that you don't have to look with just you, because even thinking about the three Hebrew boys, when they looked in and they saw somebody else there, that God will be with us in the mix of our storms, and even in the mix of taking on these giants. And once we understand our strength in God and be able to defeat these giants, there'll be some fruit that we'll carry, and it'll be so large that they carried it on the staffs, and it took two of them to carry it. But we understand that even after this, and after the congregation in 14, it says they lifted up their voice and they wept that night. And meaning the people that they were so scared, and that they were upset to where they wept, and they murmured against Moses to where they didn't believe. And so understanding the two, it says, and all of the children in 14 and 2 in Numbers, it says, and all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we have died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness? And so they had took on this negative report, and they're bathing in this negative report, and understanding how our report affects these things. It says, and wherefore have the Lord brought us into this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey. And it says, were it not better for us to return to Egypt? And they think about returning to Egypt, and they think about going back and picking a captain and returning, and understanding right then, when it says in Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, it says that which were of them that searched the land rent their clothes. And it says, and they spoke unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the Lord which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. And so tonight we have to understand that we have a choice to make. And so we have to make this choice and understand that either it's going to be a good land, and we're going to speak with the word of God, and we're going to bring our report back with our fruit, and we're going to not get so caught up into these things to where we understand our power in God, and our power rooted in God will produce some things that'll be different. And we understand that we have to go forth and understand how Israel, they started to refuse the land that would be theirs and that would be given to them, and that God had already granted with them, and they started to weep, and they started to be scared and nervous because of this report. But in understanding that Joshua and Caleb, they had to come forth, and they had to say, wait. And it says, and Caleb stilled the people in 13 and 30, meaning he stopped them. He had to tell them, be still and stop saying what you're saying for a minute. Give me just a second to stop you from giving that negative report, because I understand that there is some giants in the land, and I understand that there are some things in the land that we have to deal with and we have to go through. But he said that this is an exceeding good land, and there is some things that has been sent for us to be taken, and we have some blessings that God has sent for us to be in the land. And he understood some things differently, and he understood how the mix of his dish to work. And as I thought about a dish, and I thought about how the ingredients go together, and if we get one bad ingredient in it, how it can mess up the whole thing. And I thought about fear getting in the mix of this whole situation, and how fear can make this thing go bad, because they have started to fear these giants instead of moving on the faith of God. And so understanding how the word works with our works, and going with our faith, that dish right there, our word and our works and our faith, it will produce our gift. But the moment fear get in the mix of that, and the moment we get fear mixed in our dish, that it will mess up our whole dish, and the whole thing will be messed up. And thinking about cooking, and thinking about being in the kitchen, that if you mix one wrong thing into your ingredients and into the dish, that it will throw the whole dish off. And so we understand that we have to put our word with our works and with our faith and produce our gift, and understanding that even if it's our opportunities and our businesses in our relationships and our seeds, that we have to put the right mixes together, that we, if anything that we do not of faith is sin. And so we have to make sure every move and every time that we walk and we talk and we move, that most importantly how we act, we have to move on faith, and we have to have our moves set and our power in God and understanding who God is, so that when we come to our land and when we come to the promised land that will be granted to us, we can understand that even though there's some giants in there, and even though there's some things that there will be some fruit. And I can believe that there's some people that have already overcome some things, and people may not know the things that you've had to overcome and the things that you've had to go through to get where you are. But I'm sure that once you get to that fruit and you start to enjoy this fruit and enjoy these things that God has set forth from after overcoming and from after going through some things, that it'll be a bit different. And when we come back with this report and we can stop some things from happening, understanding that Caleb and Joshua was saved, and understanding that they were spared from going from spared actually from the people when they lived on the land, and understanding that there was a plague that was brought forth, but Joshua and Caleb, they were spared. And so understanding that what we see is what we get, and we have to keep our faith in place, and we have to keep things lined up. And even I read through a little bit more of this chapter in 14 and 8, it says, if the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it us. It says, a land which flow of milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. And understanding that these people in this land, and that these things, these giants that we see in our land, those are bread for us. Those are some things that once we get and get into it and we grab it, and God blesses us, and God provides for us right in the mix, and he starts to show us his power right in front of the giants, we'll understand that was just bread for us to eat. That was just something for us to understand the power of God a bit different. And it says, their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. And so understanding that the Lord is with us, and that as long as we have God with us, that we have no reason to fear, that God didn't give us the spirit of fear, but the spirit of power, love, and a sound mind. And so understanding says, but all the congregation bade stone them with stones, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. And the Lord said unto Moses, how long will this people provoke me, and how long will it be ere they believe me for all the signs which I have showed them? And he said that I've showed them so many signs, and I've showed them so many things. And he said, how long will it take them, and how long will they keep provoking me, even though I've shown them some signs, and even though I did some things, and I put some things and provided for them, even though I've done this, how long will it take for them to believe me and understand who I am? And then he says that I will smite them with pestilence and disinherit them, and will make of thee a greater nation and a mightier than they. And so understand that there's some things that go forth when Moses starts to intercede, and understand that there's some things that happen. There's some punishment that even goes forth. But like I said, that it was important that Joshua and Caleb understood that what they see had a lot to do with what they were getting. Understanding that their report, even though they went to this land and they were sent out to spy out this land, that they didn't know exactly what to get. And I can imagine that sometimes we get into this thing where we think the promised land is perfect, or it comes with no problems, or it comes spoiling us. But God is trying to show us that he's going to strengthen us and going to put us in a position to where we can understand ourselves better, understand our strength better, and understand who God is first. And then after that, there'll be some fruit that comes with this, and there'll be some things that happen. But we have to understand our faith a little bit different. We have to understand our works, and understand that what we see has a lot to do with what we'll get. Because if we start to talk negatives, and we start to talk down, and we start to forget where our strength is and where our power is that we'll be defeated, because we'll already have departed from our strength. As it told them that their defense has departed them, it says, and the Lord is with us. And so understanding where our strength is, and it's in the Lord, is where our power is, that tonight, understanding that there's an ingredients that goes for to produce this, and so our word with our works has to go with our faith. And so understanding that when we mix all of this together, and when we get this in the pot, and when we cook it, and when we start to develop in this, that there'll be some fruit and some gifts and some dishes that'll come from this. And that as we thought about last week and thought about that dish, to where it's so good, and understanding last week how we went forth and we talked about that dish and how good it was, to where you just want to pass it out and you just want to have somebody else to taste it. That we understand that our proof is in the pudding, and our proof is in the word of God, to where we have to get deep into it, and we have to get into it to where we understand that good dish, we pass it around, and we're excited to let somebody else have some. But tonight, understand that what you see is what you get, and our faith goes with this. And as long as we can see God, as long as we can see God as our strength and moving when working in our situation, that we'll understand our promised land. We'll be able to not see these giants as a problem, and not see these giants as something that's moving us out the way. But we see as how many groups was there, and God still was able to provide space. And we see even now how many people are here, but we still have our space, and God still provides us some land. But we see that these things have to work together. And so understanding tonight that this, what you see is what you get, and how we have to have our faith in position, and we have to see these things in a way that we, like I said, we show forth God, and God is getting the glory. And once we do these things, there'll be some fruit that come forth out of this. And tonight, I just understand that what you see is what you get.
Together, because God is the greatest power. God is the greatest power.